Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, I'm sure you've seen him and heard him and read him. He's the author of Battle for the Soul of Islam. He is an American Islamic Forum for Democracy president. He's also former U.S. Navy lieutenant commander. He's a doctor, and now I have his phone number if I have some. And he's a husband, a dad, he's an American, and he's on with us now. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser on 740 KVOR. How are you?
Oh, it's great to be with you. I've always look forward to being on your show, so thanks for having me on.
Right back at you, man. I was looking at some of the things that you've been following, and I know you did an interview. In fact, I think did a whole spread at the Blaze talking about this DC Comics introduction of a character named Isis. Now, before we go any farther, you're a little younger than me, Zuhdi, so you may not remember this show, but back in the 70s, there was a real person. It was like a cartoon, but her name was Isis, and she was this cartoon character and, had the powers and all this. And, of course, right before that was a show called Shazam. Now, none of us knew anything about that, but now the DC Comics is decided to reintroduce this character. And does it have anything to do with the world as it is now, sir?
It is just crazy. I mean, this producer Guggenheim over at Marvel decides that his response to President Trump is going to be to have a Muslim character. Mm-hmm. And, many of us have been saying, even when there was a protest from the Islamists over the show 24, we said, have a Muslim CTU unit, counterterrorism unit, that was fighting radical Islamic organizations, the Iranians, the Saudi government. Yeah, that's a great role model. But no, right now the response to Trump is to have a Muslim superhero, and their misfire is to call it ISIS. I mean, the character in the 70s that you're talking about was the female figure that was a Greek mythology figure, actually from Egypt,
right?
And whose husband was Osiris, and there was no religious undertones to it. So now they decide to bring a Muslim character, and they want to call it ISIS. I mean, talk about misfire. Imagine if the right had decided to have a Muslim character called ISIS. All hell would break loose, saying that it was characterizing Muslims as radicals, and they didn't know better than to use a different name, et cetera. It's just the bizarre of you really can't. It's a story of you just can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't make this stuff, and there they are. I mean, it's in our face. Day in, day out, and we've got that going on. And then, of course, I was talking to Robert Spencer. I'm sure you're acquainted with Robert Spencer. You probably know each other. But I'll tell you something. The stuff that we can't say anything wrong. We can't say anything bad about Islam. And this story he told me about this guy in Pakistan. He was getting his bike fixed, and it happened to be a Christian. And the Muslim man refused to pay, so he decided to have the law go after him. So this guy's in jail. This Christian's in jail. And this is over in Pakistan. But this is the kind of stuff that comes over here that's possible. And I think about Sharia law. I don't think people understand Sharia law. And then look, there are some crazy people out there that are doing things under the label of Muslim. Correct, Doc?
Oh, absolutely. And this is why, in my podcast, Reform This, week to week, I talk about how we have to change the paradigm. We can't continue this whack-a-mole program of going from Al-Qaeda to ISIS, from Paris to San Bernardino. It's all a common problem. And even these countries that are supposedly our allies, like Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, they are Sharia states. So whether they have a mafia royal family that seems to be our ally that claims ignorance and producing the militants that come back to attack them and us, it's the same toxic theocratic mentality that arrests anyone who's non-Muslim or Muslims like myself that are moderate, et cetera. And the key is, Trump won an election on fighting the establishment domestically. Correct. So it's about time we start to fight the global establishment, the Islamic establishment of these governments that are the cauldrons of radical Islam and Sharia state mentalities, and start working on the ground at the grassroots with reformist Muslims that really reject theocracy. And Islam is in that time in history that Christianity was when American Revolution happened against the Church of England. And now we're seeing I think, the beginning of a pushback on the grassroots level against the establishment, the theocrats, if you will.
In America, we don't care if you're Jewish. We don't care if you're Christian. We don't care if you're Muslim. We don't care if you're atheist. We don't care if you believe in bedknobs and broomsticks. You're an American, and you get along. You stay civil. You work together for the common cause. We decide who comes into this country, citizen of the governed. And if there's somebody trying to poke us with whatever religious fanaticism, and, of course, as of late, it's been Islam, and then people don't say or do anything about it, you're like one of the lone voices out there that are doing that, right?
Well,
you have a few.
Used to be that way, but now we have a Muslim reform movement. There are 15 to 20 of us that have signed this declaration that is a firewall of the principles that we as Muslims, that we say, you know what, we reject not only ISIS but all Islamic states.
Yes, sir.
The only thing we'd ever die for is the American military, and we reject all forms of militant or violent jihad. And this is the way we have to build networks, if you will, of reformists, the judges in Pakistan that reject the Sharia state,
right.
the Raif Bedouis of the world in Saudi Arabia that are in prison that rejected the Islamic State there. So they exist. The problem is we've just not had a platform or a strategy from Washington or elsewhere to really work with real allies who share our values.
Well, the whole thing is when you are in a country like the United States of America, we're going to have all kinds of different people. There is no state religion. I hear the church and state. Oh, there's got to be a separation of church and state. No, this is a country where we all came here to worship as we wish to, and nobody's worshiping should get in the face of anyone else's. You may not agree with it, but you don't have to slap them down or do nasty things to them. That's what this country's about, right, Zuhdi?
Oh, and what's so important about that is, people say, well, there's only 3 or 4 million Muslims in America, so let's just make sure we're safe and they're not going to attack us. But we have an experiment here that has worked.
Yes, sir.
Of like you're saying, that is everyone's equal under the law. Mm-hmm. We share a commonality of nationalism that is the only antidote to political Islam globally. So Muslims here have a unique responsibility to create an ideology that can be the only antidote to political Islam across the planet. And that's why this reform has to start here in America.
You know what, everybody? You can follow Zuhdi. You just go to Dr. Zuhdi Jasser on Twitter. He's, of course, a host over the Blaze Radio podcast, Reform This, president of American Islamic Forum for Democracy. The websites are there. And, of course, I want to thank you for your service, man, for being in the Navy and so forth. And you got to come back again. Will you come back?
Anytime.
All right, appreciate it.
Give me the word.
By the way, you have a great radio voice. You know that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, man. I'll call you back, and we'll do some more of this when we have more time. I really appreciate you coming on a Sunday.
Thanks. God bless.
God bless you, sir.